Thanks, guys. I'm really happy to close out this morning session with someone who has been not just a good friend of ours and all of ours, but an inspiration, a mentor, really someone who's been showing the way for a long, long time. Please welcome Paul Hawken. Please, Paul, have a seat right there. Paul, you've been on so many journeys since I've known you 20 plus years, and working as you did with Ray Anderson at Interface, and just showing so many paths down which all of us, or many of us, are headed, and all of us can see. Your latest one is this just fascinating project called Project Drawdown. Give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah, drawdown is, the term means the first time on a year-to-year basis where carbon, CO2, and greenhouse gas equivalents actually go down. And the first purpose of drawdown is to name the goal. 2 degrees is not a goal, it's a measure. 1.5 degrees is not a goal. Stabilization is not a goal. The only goal that makes sense for humanity is to bring it back home. Otherwise, we're not going to be here. And so what you see right now is, by calling for 2 degrees as a goal, it's sort of like saying we're in a car, we're going 60 miles per hour, and it's going to go over a cliff at some point. And we should all slow to 40 miles per hour. It'd be much better. It's not better. It's the same cliff, and we know what's on the other side of it, or on the bottom of it. So that's the first thing. Second thing, what we're doing is we are mapping, measuring, and modeling the 100 most substantive solutions to climate change that exist, that we're doing. We know how to do it. We have metrics. We have the science. We have the economics. And what's fascinating about that goal for us is it's never been done. I'm going to say it again. Google it. Try to find it. 50 years of concern about climate change, and no one has made the list of the 100, 50, 75, 60, you name it, most substantive solutions to climate change that we can do because we are doing it. And then what we do with those solutions, because they're all scaling, they all exist, is we then model what would happen over 30 years if they continue to scale at a rigorous but reasonable rate, to see if, in fact, humanity can achieve drawdown in our lifetime. And I can tell you tentatively the answer is yes, within 27 years.
So if we use these 100...
We are doing them.
These are things that are already being done.
Yeah, we're doing them. The question is, will we scale them sufficiently at a rate of growth that will allow us to do that? And they're all scaling now. Not one of them is sitting there by itself wondering if anybody will pick it up and do it. They're all scaling.
Why no one had done the math? What led you down this path?
Well, what led me down the path was in 2001 when I read the third assessment, the IPCC, and it was like, you have to parse these things because they go, here's where the Saudi Arabians came in, here's where the Russians came in, here's where China, There's no such thing as scientific consensus. Science doesn't like consensus. So when you get 2,500 scientists doing consensus, it's going to be really watered down. So when you read an IPCC summary, you have to sort of parse it and figure out what do they really mean. And it's worse than what you're reading. That's okay. But that same year, Princeton came out with the Carbon Mitigation Project and had the 15 famous wedges.
Sokolov and his wedges,
yeah. Sokolov and Pakula. And I read that, and that's when I got depressed. I wasn't depressed by IPCC, I was depressed by the solutions.
Because we had to build a wind farm like every 20 minutes for one of those wedges.
Yeah, I mean, there's energy and utility companies here. Look at 9 of them could only be adopted by the boards of directors of large energy or utility companies, and every one of them was underwater financially at that time. So that meant the boards of directors had to approve something that would be fiduciarily irresponsible. Good thinking. Like, one of them was to make hydrogen from coal with CCS for a non-existent hydrogen infrastructure, and to take the liquid carbon and put it in an Ohio salt line. That is not a solution. We still aren't doing that. And why would we? And 2 of them were for car companies and appliance companies, large ones. One was to convert 1/6 of all cropland to biofuels, really bad idea. And then there was wind and solar, great, and one was drive less.
One was end deforestation.
Yeah, and deforestation. But I mean, they were like, where do I fit in this? You know, where does the city fit? Where does a company fit in this? That, you know, just not an energy or utility company. What can it do? What can somebody who runs the school district do? What can, all was missing from these so-called wedges.
And then McKibben wrote that great article.
He did, and Global Warming's Terrifying New Math, and that was based on Mark Campanale of Carbon Tracker.
Right.
And he's a financial analyst, and he analyzed the balance sheets of oil and gas companies and just said, wow, you know, they have on their balance sheets assets that are unburnable, because if we burn them, the company itself won't exist. So, and he did the math, and then what Mark said is Bill turned that math into poetry, and he wrote this article
In Rolling Stone.
In Rolling Stone, July 2012. But the thing about the article was it just scared the pee out of people. And I have friends who've been activists for a long time, and they were like, oh, SH, you know. I mean, just whoa. And literally, really effective activists who are saying, oh, I'm just going to go build a cabin in the Squamish Valley and be seen.
Game over.
Game over.
Right.
You know? And that's when I decided to do Drawdown. Because I had been asking people in 2001, 2, and 3, big NGOs, environmental NGOs, said, let's do it. And they said, we don't do that, good idea. But we just don't do it, you know? And I asked, actually, EDF, NRDC, woof, woof, and I asked them, and said, come on, let's do it. I said, no, don't do it.
So talk a little bit about what you're doing now. You're building out these solution sets that exist, that need to scale. You're doing the math about what part of that what part of carbon can draw down so that we achieve ultimately in aggregate some level of drawdown. Who's doing the work? What's the output? How do we all benefit from this?
Well, what I decided to do is to have a coalition of people, so it's not personified. It's not a plan. It's not a proposal. It's 271 people now are part of the coalition. They're scientists, botanists, biologists, climatologists, geologists, teachers, professors, writers, artists, politicians, spiritual leaders, students, senior fellows. They're from, I think, 30 countries around the world. So that when you see the book, when it comes out in the spring of 17, you have the back cover, there's 271 authors. And it's really important that this be we talking to we. It's not somebody's idea of what we ought to do or should do. We're not going to follow somebody's plan anyway. And every time we do, we get in trouble. So let's be honest about it. So this is a reflection back to the world of how brilliant we are, not how stupid we are, not how numb we are, not how we're bringing up the rear. And we get from the media this idea that somehow we're not on the case. We are on the case, and humanity is brilliant. And this is not being reflected back. So that's what Drawdown is attempting to do. And so not only do we the solutions, but then we have what's called coming attractions. And coming attractions is really this brilliant technologies and solutions that exist, they're validated scientifically, in some cases economically, actually most, but we just don't have the metrics and the experience with them to put them in the solution set, so we call them coming attractions. And when you see that, you go, we can do this. We really can.
So how does this... So, books rarely change the world. Few of them have. Yours have, your College of Commerce changed Ray Anderson and many others' world. But at scale, that's hard to do. Yeah. And so how is this going to, what do you do with this project once it's a book in the spring of 17?
Well, it's a book, but it's also a website. It's Drawdown Interactive. All the models are open source. All of them can be downloaded and taken by anybody for their own NGO or company and be reused and repurposed. All the information is completely transparent. Every input, assumptive or citation. So we're not even trying to say we're right. What we're saying is we've done the best we can. This is the group of people who created it. But you can go right online and say, like what Peter Bick was talking about, it's like, I actually think that the carbon sequestration rate for amp grazing is 115, grams per square meter per year instead of 85. Okay, fine, put it in. Boom, you can see exactly what impact that would have. But we have not just one, we have 17 land use solutions. And really, when you come right down to it with climate, you have to stop putting it up there, right? That's number one. And that's done by changing out the energy source and efficiency, 2 ways, and bring it back home. That's it. That's it. And the best description I know is really that famous American scientist, Matt Damon, at the end of at The Martian. Remember when he's there and he's got a little gray hair, and he's like this, hero senior thing. He's going to this class of newbie astronauts. And he's saying, space is unforgiving. Well, we could say same for the atmosphere, right? It doesn't know what we think or do. It's just the atmosphere. And that when you go up there, you're going to reach a point where you're going to hit the wall. You think you're going to die. You're going to hit that point, and you think you're going to die. And he says at that point, you have to do the math and solve one problem and solve another and then another. And if you solve enough of them, you get to come home. And that's exactly what Drawdown's doing. We're doing the math. We've done the math on what's going to happen if we don't act, exquisite math. We haven't done the math on what we are doing in acting in terms of solving the problem.
So give us an example of one of the solutions that is kind of surprising to you, that be relevant to this audience, of something that can happen in some companies that you didn't expect would have such an impact.
Well, what's relevant to every woman in the audience is that one of the solutions is educating girls in the developing world.
So explain how that specifically draws down carbon.
Sure, because girls in the developing world are withdrawn from school pre-puberty because there's not a latrine, or they're embarrassed, or they're going to be married off, or for a lot of cultural reasons. If they can stay in to 10th, 11th, 12th grade, the birth rate drops from 5 to 2. And their daughters also are very different in terms of, so it's reproductive rights and knowledge and education. Of course, there's all these cascading benefits from it besides that. We just measure the impact of 3 people who don't exist, and, because she chose a different path. And so that's a solution. When you look at climate
help
solutions.
me understand that, because it seems that feels like carbon avoidance. Where's the drawdown piece?
Drawdown comes what Peter talked about. It's from biosequestration, photosynthesis. There is no other way to do it. We can do CCS and waste. It's like putting money in a dark hole. But why do CCS when we have basically a whole planet that does it every year? If you've seen the NASA video of carbon emissions, some of you may have seen the CO2 emissions, and you watch it, we do drawdown every year on this planet, 5 to 6 ppm. Do you know that? We draw down every year. The problem is that there's this inhalation, drawdown by photosynthesis in the northern hemisphere, and then in the winter, there's a natural, respiration. We exhale, but also there's our gaseous emissions from fossil fuels.
I was asking how the female empowerment and education actually draws down.
Because there's voided emissions, right? And so
I see.
Yeah.
There's less that naturally
would occur, yeah.
Okay.
Because what we're working against is the business as usual scenario, which is IEA and IPCC together, and it's basically 505 ppm by 2046, so, we're at 400 now. And by that time, the annual ppm increment would be 4.54 as opposed to, I think, 2.36 this year. So, there's a huge jump in emissions. So we do measure behavior and activities that will avoid those emissions. Absolutely, that's part of the scenario of measuring how to achieve drawdown.
Another example that might be part more directly in company operations?
Well, there is a publicly held company that's going to come out in the spring that says our purpose is to reverse climate change. And one of the things, they're a manufacturing company, and they don't farm, and they don't, and they're looking at how they build their factories. They're going to build their factories like forests. They're going to build their products, and they're going to sequester CO2 to build their products. But they're looking at their whole supply chain in terms of really how they can be net positive as opposed to just reduce their emissions. Reducing emissions is slowing how fast we go over the cliff. Bringing them back is turning the car around and going the other way. And so, but I would say what we see is surprising in terms of the data. We're doing the math. I have biases. We all do. I think this is going to work, this won't. I think this is better. I was so wrong, by the way, which I love because it means the math is the math as opposed to. And I would say that if you had gone to Paris and gave somebody a piece of paper and said, write the top 10 solutions to climate change, not in order, just, you know, nobody would have got it right. Nobody, including me, by the way.
Yeah. Let's take a question or two. Lauren?
Yeah, we're getting lots of questions, sort of encouraging how can businesses get involved in the work Drawdown is doing?
Well, one thing, they can engage with us and join the Carbon Council and be with other companies that are trying to figure this out, so that companies learn best from companies, in my opinion, and you learn best from each other. That's why you're here. And so the Carbon Council for Drawdown is to bring companies together, not to us, but us as the same you're doing, which is to coalesce them in a manner so that they can learn how to reverse climate change and to draw down carbon.
What does it take to be a member of the Carbon Council?
Oh, just a small amount of money and your name, and you don't have to, but we like money because we're a nonprofit. So, yeah. But we have Dell, and we have Akamai, and we have Interface, and we have smaller companies, Guayaki, Dr. Bronner's, and 18 Rabbits, and we have Intuit. So I mean, we want the small and the large. We just want people who care.
Yeah. Another question, Lauren?
Yeah, also several questions about how you're thinking about the policy scenario we've been talking about. Like, would you give a certain grade to the Paris climate talks, or?
Yeah, I give an A+ on intention and a C on how, or a D, really, because nobody came out of Paris with a plan of how to achieve it.
Well, you talk about naming the problem, and one of the terms that was the incantations of Paris was about low carbon economy. What do you think of that term?
That's really upside down and backwards. We want a high carbon economy. We want to bring it back home. We want high carbon everywhere, in our bodies, in our soils, in our forests. We want to recarbonize this planet. We don't want to decarbonize. That term is upside down and backwards. It's just that carbon isn't where it belongs. It came from the earth. It wants to come back here. And it comes back here. It produces healthier forests, lands, better watersheds, healthier crops, healthier animals, healthier people. And so really low carbon is not the right word. It's high carbon. We want to bring it back. Carbon is a gift. It's our ally. We're carbon-based life forms. And it's not our enemy.
Just in the wrong place.
But in policy, the question about policy is a good one. We think great policy is driven by great data, and bad policy is driven by ideology. So what we feel is that we're going to supply data that shows that these solutions are impactful. They have ancillary second, third order effects. There are no regrets, which is when you look at the list of solutions, you say, let's do it anyway. If no climate problem existed, we would want to do them because of all the benefits they have, and they pencil out. In other words, they have a positive financial return. And so for terms of policy, what we're trying to do is provide the kind of information that is peer-reviewed, outside expert reviewers, impeccably researched, so that policy makers, whether it be on a local, city, municipal, state, provincial, national, or international level, can use that information to
Will any of the 100 solutions be policy solutions?
No, because you can't measure a policy solution.
Fair enough. So at the end of the day, this started off with a fearful moment. Climate change is frightening new math. Are you more hopeful now? Can you give us a renewed sense of hope that this is something that seems so impossible is in fact possible?
I'm not hopeful.
Okay, have a safe trip home, everyone. Thanks.
I have one more thing to say, because hope is the mask of fear.
Hope?
There's no hope unless you have fear. And what I want us to be is fearless and be human beings and know that we can do it. And heck, hope, screw that. We want to be fearless and smart and brilliant, and we are. And I just say, let's do it, instead of being hopeful, which is kind of a passive position.
Well, in spite of all that,
Inspiring is different. I'm inspired by what people are doing.
in spite of all that, I am a little more hopeful. but I also am more inspired, and that's something. That's the gift of Paul Hawken that keeps on giving, that you've been giving for so long, inspiring us to think, to look at the world differently, think about what's possible differently in our lives, in our businesses, and in our communities. And I think the promise of Drawdown is unbelievably powerful. Just the fact that we can rethink that. You know, it's not about stopping climate. It's about repatriating carbon, about drawing it back down to where it belongs, and getting to where we all want and need to be.
You know, and the thing about Drawdown as a goal is that actually, just like sustainability and was spoken about earlier, it actually expands creativity, it expands imagination, it expands innovation, it opens things up. It's great for morale and esprit de corps as well, but it actually, what we're seeing in the companies that are adopting it is this tremendous sense of opening, as opposed to like zero and less and, you know, but what's going to happen, you know, we're just doing our part. Rather than that, it really has a tremendous impact in terms of human capacity to reimagine the world. And that is what we're doing, is reimagining what it means to be a human being on the planet at this time. And there's no reason that we cannot create a society and a culture and an enterprise system that's just as life-giving as everything we see outside.
Please join me in thanking Paul Hawken.
Thanks.